busy people in the room, and so we want to respect your time. Really appreciate you taking the chance to come down and be part of this. It's a little bit of a new idea for us, but something that we feel strongly about.
Mike, let's get you one more chair.
Why don't you take my seat, Mike? Mike, you want to come back here, and I'll just move back over here.
I got it. Keith, stay there.
Okay.
You don't want to be on
I had a lot to drink down there.
You wanted to sit at the food table?
Yeah, actually.
So I was just saying it's a little bit of a new idea for us to kind of reach out, do a little bit more of, it's not a formal term, but a focus group or interactive dialogue between what I would consider some of our more frequent customers, people who are influential in construction or development world in our community. And we wanted to take the time to both just connect with you on a level that we don't kind of in our day in, day out operations. So we're going to start with a little bit of like big picture, what are some national factors that are affecting us here in Durango? What sort of things are you concerned about or excited about in your industry? And just sort of share some of those things, trends, opportunities, threats at a higher level. And then we'll dig in and we'll talk a little bit about some improvements we've made, some ways that we're trying to communicate more clearly about our process, really with the intent of helping you all or your clients to have a better understanding of the process and set you up for success so that you know the types of terminology we're using, you know what the priorities are, you know expectations, just so we're all on the same page going in. And then we've all experienced at staff level and customer level frustrations and lack of clarity, and we're never going to get perfect. We're never going to, ultimately have those things pinned down every time. But we're starting to map that out and try to provide a lot more clarity through that process. And then we'll share some upcoming things that we plan to work on and what your input on shaping. I thought it'd be helpful to go around. I think everybody probably knows or knows faces, but maybe quick introduction, what your role is. And I thought, what about your favorite place in Durango you'd like to go? Durango or surrounding area, what's your favorite spot? Restaurant or natural spot, something. So I'm Scott Shine, Community Development Director. I've been with the city for 10 years, been in this role for a year and a half. And I think my favorite spot is the top of Skyline Trail.
Okay, I don't have much time to think about it, but I'm Lily Oswald. I'm with the Community Development Department, and I just got started here in June. So somewhat new, but excited to hear from you all today and just hopefully help put it together so you've received some emails from me. But my favorite spot, we live near the river and enjoy going to the 29th Street put-in and just dipping in there in the summer when it's hot. And then just, yeah, kind of doing some people watching and things like that over there. So.
Cool. Zane Wells, born and raised Durango, Fort Lewis College grad, co-owner of the Wells Group. Favorite place is Electra Lake.
Darren Stewart, civil engineer at SEH, and favorite place would be Sailing Hogs.
Jack Llewellyn, CEO, Durango Chamber of Commerce, and anywhere in the mountains.
Matt Opperly, project manager for FCI Constructors. Say my favorite place is probably the river trail.
Mike Fouts, Vice President, FCI Constructors. I'm with Jack, any place in the mountains.
Logan Austin, a broker with Keller Williams, was here as representative of Durango Area Association of Realtors, board member, CAR director for the state level, and also chair of the Government Affairs Committee here locally. And have a development project up in Silverton, work with a lot of these type of people and communities. So I really appreciate the opportunity for you guys to have a discussion here. And right now, kind of go-to spot is Oxbow. So it'll be an evening stroll.
Tracy Reynolds, architect. I would say my favorite place is whatever project I have under construction. Right now, it's a lot of time at middle school, so.
Jenny Nikovich, I'm the Stormwater Program Manager in Public Works. I think my favorite place is Nordic Skiing at Vallecito.
Keith Doherty, I'm the city engineer, part of Public Works, but we work closely with community development on development review, and my staff, the engineering techs and stormwater folks, the ones that review project submittals. Favorite place, I'm a mountain person. Probably my de facto is when I get a quick minute, I run up Smelter.
I'm Allison Baker, civil engineer, public works director. Definitely don't run up Smelter. I think probably the trails around over the hill, outfitters. I'm a horseback person, love the horses.
Cool. West Hill, I've been in the area about 18 years or so now. All different aspects of construction over those 18 years and development these days for the past 3 years. We've got about 100 acres in Three Springs we're developing. And favorite place is probably the mountains, dirt bike, rock climbing, any of that stuff.
Daniel Murray. I was with the county for 10 years and now I'm with the city coming up on 2 years. I'm development services manager, so the current planning and permitting side, including building permitting side of community development. In my favorite place, I'm gonna go with the trails and particularly the west side, because that's my side of town, like test tracks.
Clayton Harrison, I'm with CHC Engineers, civil engineering company. I guess my favorite place is also up in the mountains, but specifically in front of a campfire.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can have those this summer.
Great.
Cool, thank you. Appreciate the round of introductions, even though, like I said, I think we all kind of cross paths and interconnect in a variety of ways. But so we've got great diverse representation from very early stages, design, property sales, that to building projects, to promoting them or reselling them. So it's nice to have a mix of people. And like I said, all of you interface with us in different ways. But I think to start, I hope you'll take some time with us to sort of step back before we get into the nuts and bolts of our processes and how we operate in the community. And just we have some slides to prompt. Here are some trends that we've seen over the past few years. These are things we think about as well. What's going on with AMI, what's going on with our workforce, cost of materials, not necessarily at the level that you dig in, but we try and stay aware of the things that are out there that affect our work. So we'll start with that, and then we have a few prompts, and we'll be taking some notes just to hear from you all again as sort of industry leaders, what you see coming down the pipe. So
yeah,
go ahead.
And we should mention too, we're recording this one, and from that camera, that's microphone, but just I think for reference for us to go back in case we missed something in our notes. I don't think we'll be, throwing this up on our city website or anything like that. But just for everyone's reference, if you have any issues with that, speak now. But yeah, we'll kick it off, like we said, pretty high level with just things that we're observing with trends. Again, the purpose and objectives are on everyone's agendas as well, and that's been forwarded to you all. And these are the things we'll be trying to go over today. Of course, kind of looking nationally and regionally, there's a lot of challenges in the development and construction arena. None of that is unique to Durango, but uniquely in Durango, some of those things can kind of seem more constrained and difficult here just with our supply and demands, but it is not anything new, but it is hopefully also an opportunity to enhance collaboration and just offer more effective ways to work together and find some creative solutions to these challenges with these foreseen and unforeseen barriers to the development industry. So yeah, as we see in Durango, just a few Durango-focused economic and demographic profiles here. So for population, it's been a steady increase. This is just through 2000. I don't think this is news to anyone. It's a beautiful place to live. We all have different things that we love about Durango, and it's becoming also a successful hub for different sectors in the economy, which is great, but also challenging with housing with those things too, as we all know. And kind of in line with that, we're seeing an upward, pretty steady trajectory of market rate home prices in Durango. The median home price has somewhat skyrocketed in the last few years, which again, isn't news to anyone, but also offers challenges with construction and those demands with people wanting to move here. And right now we're looking at just under 800,000 for the median home price within the city limits of Durango. The average cost of rent is also somewhat skyrocketing these last few years. The current price is around $17.91. That's in 2022, so we're a couple years back there. But I believe things are starting to look maybe like they're leveling out, but still pretty expensive for the rental housing prices, again, specific to the city of Durango. And that represents all unit types of rental. The median income, which we discussed briefly, this is inflation adjusted, but kind of contrasting to those other upward skyrocketing trends, it's somewhat remained stagnant. There are a lot of leading businesses and other things that have taken off a bit in Durango, which we're seeing with more people being able to stay in Durango, but we also are seeing too that a lot of median incomes are somewhat staying the same, which these other things with average rent prices and average home prices makes it more challenging for the cost of living, which is a big part of what we're dealing with in the community development and engineering realms. And hopefully we can find some creative and collaborative solutions for.
I have a question on those. Are those adjusted for inflation or raw?
This is adjusted for 2022 inflation.
There it is. Sorry, I missed that.
No, yeah, it's a good question because raw looks a little bit better. Yeah, it is inflation adjusted, and that's just from the census there. This is also census, but this is workforce commuting patterns. It's not broken down for distance traveled, but it does show that we have a considerable amount of folks, about 9,000 who are employed within the city of Durango but live outside of it. A lot of that has to do with what these other things represent of cost of living and things like that. And that's about 70% of our current workforce. And then 30% of the workforce is employed and living within the city of Durango. And we're hoping to kind of maintain more different facets of that because it's complicated, different pieces in the puzzle, but better transportation, missing middle housing pieces and things like that to help address that. But yeah,
to distill that, workforce of 12,700 people, 8,800 of them drive in every day. That's
yeah. And those are also questions with parking and other things that we deal with too. So, yeah, and then we have just one piece here on economic data, just to sort of simplify it and keep it as a short, high-level overview. But this represents the construction material cost. This is also from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, but we see a couple spikes there. It's again not news to anyone, but it just kind of exacerbates a lot of those issues with supply and demand, especially in geographically confined areas like Durango and a lot of communities in the Mountain West. With even if these projects are going live, finding employees and finding opportunities to make those come through at a somewhat feasible timeline is a challenge. So those labor costs and material costs are following suit with staying expensive. So I went through those pretty quickly. If, we touched on a few just very high level, basic demographic and economic data points, but if you all have other trends that you're seeing in your fields, this is kind of the opportunity to link those in together and see if there's anything maybe, because we have our heads focused on certain things, but there are things that we don't experience in the same way as all of you, so.
Yeah, I think maybe just starting, any observations, all that is not news to you guys. It was just meant to kind of kind of get things started. So you know all those things, you track them very closely. From that information, you know, what are the most significant impacts to your company right now, or challenges as you're looking about executing projects? Let's start maybe outside of city review processes and standards, and let's start more with these bigger picture stuff, and then we'll dig into the other items as we move forward. But thoughts on that?
I always hear cost of labor. I look at you guys and, trying to find, workforce that will show up, the cost of labor, finding good quality, skilled, the high school's addressing a lot of that with, Skills USA and trades, but I'm curious too of the, if supply, the supply chain issues,
It's still a problem,
is it?
but I'd say labor is a bigger problem for us right now. And the ability for these subcontractors even to grow, they just can't do it. They can't find the people. I think wages are a problem because they're increasing, but there's not enough money to get the laborers here. They could throw all the money they want to, the labor, the people just aren't available.
And is there an appetite by some of the smaller subs? They see the opportunities, they want to scale up, and people aren't just there, or is there this, I'm just kind of my 1 or 2 person shop and I don't want to?
I think the majority of them would like to grow. They want to grow their business, take on more work, but they've got to be pretty choosy on what jobs they take.
What about you guys self-performing or doing more work, hiring more workers for FCI or one of the bigger companies rather than doing as many subs?
We've talked about doing that, but it's hard for us to find the people as well. I mean, we struggle to find management, to find new hires from colleges. So it's not just laborers or carpenters, it's managers, project engineers. They're hard to find, and it's tough to get them here. So we've talked about doing more self-perform work. We're like the subs, though. We don't know where the people would come from.
How about your work throughout the year? Are the seasonal constraints part of the equation that you're looking at in trying to get people and get them working full-time, I guess you'd say?
So, I mean, what we do isn't too seasonal.
Right.
We work through the winters. So that's not, I don't think that's necessarily the biggest issue. There's a lot of those workers do work seasonally, whether they work at purgatory for the winter, stuff like that. So some of the workers tend to be. But yeah, I mean, we generally don't slow down during.
It's good.
Our efforts get focused on other things, whether it be snow removal and trying to keep subcontractors moving. But
Not so much asphalt and concrete.
asphalt, of course, they shut down
Yeah, but they're
for
going.
the season, but concrete keeps going.
For hiring professional help, the biggest downfall is housing. And we've made offers to people, and these are generally $80,000 to $120,000 positions, I would say. And people are all gung-ho about it until they start looking at, well, where can I live in Durango? And the answer is nowhere. You can live in Bayfield. And that's a huge hurdle for us. We have 3 people right now who commute in from New Mexico every day. We have a structural engineer working remotely from Chicago. And none of those are ideal. We'd rather have them in town.
They would rather be in town.
They would, yeah.
We have a similar challenge where, well, we can hire right out of college. And they love Durango, but by the time they're 25, 26, 27, they're looking to settle down. They kind of give up hope and then they leave. So it's a challenge, just like Tracy said.
We've talked about this a few years ago, but also for those that are planning the development or going through the process or a business, but having having the right people in the room. There's someone from CDOT, from the city, from planning and engineering, wastewater, fire department, all at one table so they can get their answers answered in one stop, so to speak, or one session versus having to go chase a lot of things down because time is money. But I've heard that, you know, been in this job 17 years, but just, I've got to go, thought everything was a go, and then, you know, fire department requires X, Y, Z, or there's something else that's needed where it'd be nice to have everyone at one general city.
So just the ability to connect with all the different entities and being spread out.
You know, decision makers at one time, you know.
What about, so yeah, housing, labor, supply chain opportunities that you all see, either, again, trends in consumer preferences or construction, innovative construction types? What types of things are on your radar that you're like excited about that could address some of these issues?
One thing that comes up pretty much every day now for us is offsite construction. Looked at a number of projects, trying to make that work. And I think that's going to become more and more popular. And there's more people doing it. It's more people getting into the market.
Did you use that term intentionally instead of modular or factory built, just anything offsite?
Yeah, you can use any of those terms are fine. Yeah. And that could be single family, duplex, townhome, up to, you know, multi-unit apartments too.
We agree with that. I would add that it would be naive to think that solves the problem. It might help a little bit, but right now the costs are a toss up. I don't know if that's going to change because we're not going to have a modular manufacturer that doesn't have construction capabilities. So that the costs are pretty much the same. You can do a little faster with modular, but modular is not going to solve the housing problem.
Right.
Were you guys successful with Gurdon on that project? Was it worth it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we brought it to market probably 5-6 months faster than we could if we stick built it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
With the labor shortage that we have around here, it helped with the labor shortage.
Gotcha. Yeah. I've been talking to them a little bit about the Crater Apartments out there, and they are, maybe you guys heard this, they're trying to set up shop in Colorado. Would save on trucking, but it's still expensive. I mean, your overall square foot costs probably weren't that less. They were just
They're about the same.
yeah, the timing.
You're asking about gauge apartments or a different one?
Gauge, yeah. Yeah.
Anything else? Any lights at the tunnel or?
I think, and piggybacking on what Jack's saying, like from our standpoint on the consumer side, especially in like business development end of things, like those processes and having as much front end conversations as you can have, because keeping in mind a lot of people that are going to take down a space even for lease or something, they hit change of use issues that just throw all the rules out the window almost, right? And now they're starting from scratch. And understanding when they walk in the door, if they're going to face those challenges, at least they know going in before they get too far down that diligence period. Because for them, like Jack's saying, time is money. And, you know, obviously we talk a lot about the cost of housing. And I think the missing piece that we don't talk too much about or enough, that I feel like, is the revenue side and creating more business development, and creating more sustainable workforce and ways to offset our AMI structures right now. And it just, I've, over the last, almost 10 years of my career, can't count how many times a business has not even gotten off the ground just from those challenges and processes. I know you guys for the past few years have really tried to streamline it, but I've got good friends right now that are having a challenge with the space in Bodo. They took it down for lease and then they got through the processes, and now it's, we want you to do a sidewalk or do some other significant financial burden that they didn't know going in. So now it's like, well, what am I going to do?
along that same line, and I know you're involved with the governmental affairs, but is having somebody at the city even monitoring, and we do it at the chamber, but at the state level, construction defects, emissions, I know they're the state level looking at mandating, no buildings, restaurants to be built unless you use electric stoves, electric ovens, things of that nature. And it just,
Denver's trying to do that.
yeah, and it just it drives the cost up. And so having that type of even a weigh-in from the city's perspective that says, this is the impacts, and we're monitoring at the chamber along with other chambers throughout the state. But I think that's something that's important, especially like the construction defects. Some of the legislative efforts are just paralyzing.
There's a lot of land use bills right now. In some ways could roll back some regulations, but also just make things a little more complicated. So we're definitely tracking those.
Yeah, I think one of the newest ones that was proposed 2 weeks ago was the HVAC rules that they're trying to implement at the state level, and how much of those could augment build costs. I mean, effectively looking at the code in Denver and what builders have to do to hit those efficiency marks, and painting a broad stroke. I would hope that the city would look at that from like kind of an autonomous land use argument, just as they did with SB 213 last year, because that land use bill was effectively going to try and create, blanket statewide inclusionary zoning and things like that, that small communities, this doesn't work, right? And that's why I feel like being involved with those conversations, like Jack saying, is critical, because we have so many more constraints that some of those larger metropolitan areas don't. And that's where a lot of those legislators are coming from with their opinions, not to say they're right or wrong. It's just, it's too broad of a viewpoint, I think.
It's great.
Like a House Bill 1300 that's home cell wildlife mitigation requirements. And it's just that I know a lot of counties come out against it. They're opposing it. So I was encouraged to hear that, but there's just a lot of that at the state level that's going on that just trickles down. It's, impactful on top of what all you guys are trying to accomplish.
I would love to see more deed restricted units. The ones on 32nd have been great. Those 4 units placed for local workers in housing. Aspen has over 3,000 deed restricted units. Telluride even has a couple hundred. We're way behind the mark here, but we could somehow make it more advantageous for developers to do it. That's the only way I see a resolution in keeping the people here that we need to have here working, the teachers, the bartenders, everybody. We need workforce housing, not affordable, in my opinion.
I think it's good you combine the teachers with the bartenders,
Well, they might be saying
Yeah, we'll touch more on partnerships and tools in a bit.
One thing I've been involved in recently, the town of Ignacio is doing an affordable housing community called Rock Creek. But it's town-owned land, and the town is the developer. So they've hired us to design the infrastructure, and then they're going to Fading West modular home builder to provide the units. But that's been a unique project in many ways. We pretty much invented our own road standards as we went through this process to keep the costs down, to give them the space they need to get the units they wanted to get. Yeah, I've never been involved in something like that. So that shows there's some innovative ideas out there and how we get infrastructure costs down.
Fading West, is that Buena Vista?
That's the Buena Vista.
Scott, have you guys feel like, I know this is recorded, but do you feel like your work with the county is getting better over the years? Because that's what I've heard myself as county staffed up. You guys are starting to kind of work in concert. And I just asked that question because as we look at the expansion of Durango, it just seems naturally that joint planning area is just going to be where the crux of a lot of that new growth and development is going to occur. Just making sure that everybody's kind of in that same boat as far as what we're going to do to be successful, I think will help people when we get into. Because once we're looking at La Costa Road expansion, all these major annexations, right? It's like you you gotta start with the county, but then you gotta talk to the city, because it might be a city, and it's like streamlining those processes too.
It's definitely
Very
something,
beneficial.
yeah, that's been difficult to navigate. Annexation actually makes it a lot simpler because then it
Right.
just brings it into the city and there's one jurisdiction. It is those joint kind of transition areas that have been hard. I think when we get down to like the project specific level, there is a lot of good synergy and, you know, Daniel and the planners meet every other week with county staff and we can go through the specifics of a project or the details of a project. When we step back and we're talking more about sort of priorities and approach and things, I think there are still some gaps. But we sit on the RHA with the county, so the Regional Housing Alliance, that's been a good win. They're involved in the Economic Development Alliance. We are as well with some of those programs. So yeah, there's pros and cons there. I think it's definitely, everybody knows the intergovernmental agreement for the joint planning area needs to be reworked. I think everybody's very intimidated to crack it open.
It's a heavy lift for sure.
Have to navigate that. So we've done something recently with Three Springs, and I'll share that later, but we brought in a third party, almost like a mediator, to do the project management, to listen to both sides, to help navigate into agreement. That might be a good strategy for something like the city-county agreement. Have a third party who that's their focus. It's not just relying on staff, kind of finding the time amidst everything else. So it's a good question, and yeah.
Right, because it just seems like when you're starting to have conversations, when you're getting into like private-public partnerships, you know, that public side with the county, city, all these intergovernmental agencies like RHA working in concert to really go secure federal state, like you're gonna have a stronger voice when you go to the table to get those funds to help, you know, the private side, you know, have a big lift and develop something.
And we have the Animas City Park townhomes. We're our Urban Renewal Authority project. The county has representation on the Urban Renewal Authority. So there are definitely some links that are positive.
Darren, did you say, so you guys were you were able to creatively design the roads and things in Ignacio? Is that because their land use code is not defined, or?
Their land use code allows for
Flexibility?
It's a PUD project, so we can basically create our own codes.
Gotcha.
So we did narrower streets, attached sidewalks, you know, very reduced width right of ways.
So I think that would be a huge bonus if when the annexation does happen, if there were opportunities for the developer and the city to work together on that concept, you know, just like we've been talking about Elk Grove, you know, for a year now, but to keep the costs down, because the infrastructure cost is huge, you know, and the costs continue to go up.
So yeah, infrastructure designs. We talk a lot about that balance of flexibility, but also consistency, and we try and navigate that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we know you all watch each other's projects, and so we have to maintain that consistency.
Right.
But,
Understood.
or have, you know, justifiable.
Yeah,
things.
what's the mechanism to change that exactly, and that'd be a fair scenario.
And some of the bigger, you know, definitely Twin Buttes, Three Springs, did that work of creating their own codes and standards, trying some newer, innovative things. I think we've learned lessons through that either make us, you know, hesitant to do those things again, or so I think it's something we have a PDE process, obviously, as you know, but we try and maintain that consistency where possible.
Understood. I understand the reasoning why.
Yeah, but that's good. Good point.
I think too, and you know, you mentioned the sidewalks out in Bodo. I know a lot of businesses saying, just trying to, you know, keep the business, trying to get it open, and then they get hit with the sidewalk and some of them like what's, you know, public right of way. And if there's something, what's Urban Renewal Authority or something that could take place where the city could start putting in sidewalk, if that's what they're going to require, and start doing some of that work and legwork ahead of time, so it doesn't fall back on the business of, like, think of, Stone Age. I mean, they're here because founders want Durango and they like it here, but there's no reason they should be here, and trying to find more businesses that can manufacture the right type of product that can be exported, because they usually, the primary job providers that pay higher level wages. Some of that and making sure that, okay, if you fit, especially out in the Posta area, okay, you fit this design standards, then rubber stamp, go, not delay after delay.
We're going to touch on some of the standards and I think get into this in another section too, but it's a good conversation. I want to hear your thoughts on how do we do these things and accomplish some of these goals that council and the community wants, but also not burdening projects so that makes it difficult to do.
And I think part of this too, when make this transition and talk about some work we've done on customer service, part of this is to give you a glimpse too into the world we're in. And there's neighbors, there's adjacent property owners, there's other things that we're in a position of navigating that I think is helpful for you to see. Animas View Drive is a good example. As development happened out there, we didn't require sidewalks, and now we're in a kind of a bad catch-up situation. Person obviously was killed out there. So those are the things that we're sort of having to look out and anticipate when we're having these conversations. So again, just a good opportunity to think about all the factors that we're trying to weigh, while also providing predictability, helping to communicate where there's flexibility and where there's not, those types of things. One thing, and I think, Jack, maybe you would be a key partner here, is that communication out front, because a lot of you aren't business owners in the sense that you're looking for a storefront or somewhere to go, but a lot of those people get caught up in this, and they're just, I love, building bikes or making ice cream or whatever, and I just go and I lease a storefront, and I have no idea about fire code, building code, public improvements. How can we get out ahead of that? Kind of like you guys were saying, what are those effective communication tools? Maybe, real estate agents helping so that they don't sign that lease and then come in, and everybody hates that situation.
That's
when
one of
we're
those
like small
unaccounted
business
costs that
owners,
they're not
sorry.
expecting. Yeah.
So if you could kind of mull that over and help us, because we have that information, we can provide that up front. It's just that business owner or that individual doesn't think about, I need to go talk to community development before they sign the lease. So we can circle back to that. But you can see the different scales of things we're trying to address. Mike,
Do you know what the rate of population growth? I mean, what is it typically right now, like per year?
That's a great question, and I'll get an answer for you in a few minutes while he gives some other updates. I don't know off the top of my head.
It's about 1%.
Is it 1?
1%, because one of the major challenges that we do have is a lot of our land is highway commercial, and attracting those retailers. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into that, and I've even thought of possibly if we could provide I guess, is there opportunities for the city to engage in that and help attract those as well?
Yeah.
It's kind of what I thought, because look at Montrose, for example. I mean, everybody wants Target here. We've tried and it's difficult, so I don't, just an idea, but.
I don't know if you know Wes, but I worked and lived in Montrose for 6 years.
Oh, okay.
Before coming here. And there was one real prominent developer there, and they were able to show that the trade area was much larger. You get Gunnison, Montrose, Ridgeway, Uray, obviously. And so that was how they showed numbers.
Gotcha. And that's what I try to do, because right off the bat, they go and look at the population of Durango. And so I put in the initial email, well, look, I mean, we're looking at La Plata County here and the radius of Bayfield and Pagosa and Ignacio. But that's, yeah,
Yeah, and we'll touch on something that's coming up that may or may not relate to like
Okay.
recruitment. Circle back to that.
Call it out. Let's get the mall owners to.
Good luck, Jack.
I didn't know.
You're gonna get sued.
Kim, if you're listening.
So we have, what is it? Where's the list here? We have about 4 or 5 things we wanted to touch on as far as enhancements to the process recently. I think it probably worked best to just let us get through this whole section, kind of either write down your questions or if you have a clarification, feel free to jump in, but we'll try and cover this and then we can take some time to talk through all of these. Daniel and I will kind of tag team this, but so we're starting at a very kind of foundational level about how we provide services, sort of, you know, a lot of things I'm sure you guys talk about, the culture of our workplace and sort of building that sentiment of it's not developers are black hat and we're the white hat, but these are customers and they have a very valuable role to play in the community. Like I said, we also have citizens and adjacent property owners that are customers. They have a very valuable role to play in providing input to developments. And so when you think about customer, you all are customers, but again, please just consider the other types of people that are looking to us for information to, you know, provide transparency in a process, those types of things. So that is a very kind of holistic definition of customer service. This was really interesting. We took a couple weeks, I think, over the summer, and we had our team tabulate all the touch points that we had with the public, with the customers. So you can see here, this is 1 week actually of data. And we have a staff of 16, 17 people doing various roles, but you can see how many touch points we have per week of people coming in. You know, everything from a very formal sit down pre-app to just an email saying, what are my setbacks, to upset customer about their neighbor's fence. You know, all those things are included in that. Just to give you a sense of volume, you multiply that out by 50 weeks a year, and you come up with almost 55,000 customer interactions out of this office. So that was helpful, I think, for to share with like our city manager, city council. When they get the one disgruntled email, we try and say, okay, that's important. We really want to get back to that and hear that complaint, but think about all of the others that we're processing that go smoothly, that are, you know, finding a solution and those types of things. So it helped to provide a sense of scale to the work that we're doing. Some of you may have taken this survey. We did a quick Survey Monkey outreach to inform our customer service strategy that we're going to share with you. I think this was phrased as, what are the top 3 ways that the city could improve its service delivery, something along those lines. And you can see here the feedback that we got. This is not statistically valid or anything. It's just kind of an online survey, but you know, obviously accelerated, quicker review processes, clarity, and more frequent communication. So those definitely stood out. Also, you know, public hearings or meetings, looking at right sizing those. So we have done some work in that area. So this is where we landed in really trying to communicate this in a simple way, both, you know, to our customers and to city council. This idea of building community together, that's a kind of a catchphrase, tagline that helps to encapsulate really what we want to be doing out of our department. Building, we are going to grow, we want to facilitate that. Serving the community is a very core value. And then doing it together. Over the past, you know, few years, as I've been able to take more of a leadership role, and the community's been very clear about what their expectations are. An emphasis on partnerships has really come through, We're starting to be able to deliver on some of those now with, Animas City Park, Durango Crossings, Three Springs, La Posta. Some of these are really starting to take shape in a way that I don't think has in the past. So again, just a very high level statement to capture kind of what we're trying to nurture. And then you can see how these three categories that we identified around providing assistance. And one of the things I'm trying to build, and Daniel is trying to build in the team, is thinking of ourselves as sort of like concierges of the code or navigators of the code. Again, we deal with a lot of just small business owners, homeowners that are like, how am I supposed to navigate this 500-page code? And really taking that ownership to help walk people through that professionally and efficiently. Communicating clearly, consistently, trying to get all the information up front and taking ownership over that communication. And then this touches on Darren, Wes, I think, trying to be sensitive to the context of each project. And that's a little bit scary for planners sometimes because they see it as inconsistent or favoritism or some of those things. But it's something Daniel's voiced as part of his transition from coming from the county. He saw this happening in the city, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he wanted to be a part of that. He wanted to be a part of really engaging in projects and making them fit their context, and not just sort of saying, here's the code, figure it out. So it's again, it's a dance, it's a balance. I work with a lot of engineers, makes them nervous, but we're trying to find the right way to understand the context, document if there's a need for some sort of modification to the code, and then be able to feel confident moving forward. That doesn't mean we're just throwing the code out the window or setting ourselves up for problems in the future. So those are three things that are really core to how we're wanting to deliver. This is all in your handout. I won't go over each of these, but you can get a sense of how we're defining that, what we're communicating among our team, of how we want to provide service. I want to again reiterate, the customer includes a lot of different people. It's not always just the applicant at the counter. It's and I've said that a couple of times, so I won't beat that down, but just bear that in mind. And part of these conversations is to help you think about that in advance. Say, okay, what if I was going to put myself in my neighbor's shoes? Like, what would I be worried about? How can I address that on the front end? What do I know about the city's priorities right now? How can I incorporate that into this project, the design of this project? Or I've got a client coming in that wants to do this, crazy design, letting them know on the front end. That's going to probably either take you more time or it's not going to get approved. Kind of helping you to filter that. And in your work, when you're preparing to come talk to us, being equipped to speak to some of these things and some of the other priorities that we'll talk about in the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan. So let's roll right into the pre-application process.
So we actually took on an internal process, community development and engineering, and we asked ourselves, how could we make more visible and consistent our planning review process, starting with pre-app. So very simple graphic in the beginning here, about 5 steps. All projects start with a pre-application meeting, submit, review, a decision's made, and the permit gets issued. So we have, and Scott, if you want to
just that easy.
Navigate to it, yeah, a pre-app form online, and it's actually back. Yeah, you can stay there. And it is, I know SCH is dialed in on this because we do get almost all your applications starting by way of this form. So it comes in, one point of contact, and then we filter it out to our team from there. So you have this sense, I believe that SCH really values it, that they know their project, at least the concept is not submittal yet, but they've done something. It's been kicked off. They've gotten the basic who, what, why, and where. This is our concept. Here's our site plan, and we'd like to meet with you. And we've put some more. Oh, well, wait a moment. We put a little more structure to it. We have a pre-app agenda now that all staff can walk through the project, as well as meeting with, I think I heard this notion already, can we get the right people in the room? Can we get fire from the onset? We bring engineering to the table. Maybe it involves CDOT. maybe it involves a big utility component. So we bring them to the table early on, and we even follow up from the pre-app with notes or minutes, if you want to call it. So there's this shared information as what was discussed. The goal, as we've identified already multiple times, I've heard this sentiment, is that the developers are willing to do whatever X standard is. It just would be much more ideal if it's known up front. So minimize the issues, minimize the unknowns of a project, things that come up later. To the extent we can, we want to identify process standards and any red flags from the onset. So that's where we put some energy into our pre-app process. And you can go ahead now. It's a series of pages. Yeah, it's just the pre-app step 1. Thank you. So that's on our development services page, and it has 4 steps here. And I don't know if it'll really let you advance, but
I think also there are some expectations for the pre-app as far as some work that's been done in advance. It's not just, hey, come talk to us about an idea.
yeah, I actually don't think it'll let you advance unless you attach something. So we need a sense of where and the concept. So we have made that a required field, putting some work on both sides.
Daniel, how long is it taking to get the pre-app meeting scheduled?
I would like it to be within a week. Hopefully you hear from someone within 24 hours and then scheduling within a week.
It's a larger project where we need to, wrap in CDOT or DFPD. Sometimes that can push it out scheduling wise, but that's a great question and point of feedback for later on, some measurements of our performance. We want to get some feedback on what that would look like. So that could be a good metric. So that's where that lives. Real simple form. I would say this is, everything outside of like a single family building permit that doesn't necessarily trigger a pre-app. If there's some variances involved in the building permit, then yeah, probably submit one of these if you're going to need variances or alternative compliance. But this is pretty much every land use project would start here. Just thinking out loud, as we've heard your feedback, something like this for more of a business owner location feedback form before they get to the business license application. Is there some sort of vetting that they can do? So,
yeah, and that thinking is being channeled by both Tommy Crosby, our economic opportunity, and our code enforcement officer, Chris Simpson, because they're dealing with it. Tommy's with the business, Chris is dealing with it. How'd you get this far? And they've been calling it a business 101. They want to create a handout, a brochure that outlines the series of steps to get from idea to operational. So I wasn't going to get into that. Oh, but you do have in your packet. Yes, thank you, Keith. I mentioned consistency and visibility. So this is part of our side of consistency. Engineering was able to distill down about 7 items that every project needs analysis for from the beginning.
Right,
So
and I
you
mentioned
see
that in
those.
the context of the pre-app agenda, because that's one of the things we incorporate in that agenda document. Something that comes out of the minutes. These are generally things we're looking for on every project. Water, sewer, storm, road or frontage, access, pedestrian connectivity, sidewalks. So we generally ask for all of those things on pretty much every project. And so we wanted to have something out there. Not only can you have it, but is it adequate? You might have a water line in front of your project. Maybe it's not sufficient. It might be a 2-inch line or 4-inch line. Those generally aren't adequate. Same with the sidewalks. Like a lot of places have some rollover curb or 30-inch sidewalk. ProAg and ADAG don't allow us to go to 30 inches. Right? So our sidewalks are getting bigger just because you have sidewalk there. Is it adequate? So those are some of the things that we're trying to incorporate into these agendas so that they're known up front and people recognize them early in the process.
provide adequate space for stormwater from the front end, not.
Yeah, think about stormwater early. I think it's one of those things we're always battling for space, right? And can we do multifaceted features? I think we call them multi-use features. And we've tried to do some of those as examples in the city where some of our parking lots, like the library or Santa Rita, we've integrated those with the landscaping so that we get some stormwater treatment with the parking lot feature, doesn't have to be a separate feature that's set aside with other space. So just some things to think about, but we wanted to give a list of generally these 6 or 7 things we kind of hit on every project.
Thank you.
One thing I would like to say about this is like if we were able to tie in larger project building permit procedure as well, because like I used Mesa Verde Estates, for example, you know, it was kind of a mess, it seemed like, and they kept coming back with, well, we didn't know this, we didn't know that. You know, so if there was a guide on those exact fees, I think a lot of times too, like it would come back, well, you need to talk to the fire department about this, or you need to talk to, you know, SDSD about this one. And then if a suggestion would be is if you have the timeline with the site plan approval, you know, if say, you know, there was a guide in there of when building permit could actually run concurrently with that. Say site plan is at 80%, you guys would accept it, you know, just solid guidelines on that piece.
Yeah, I think, you know, we often think, even in this next chart, thinking about, okay, we're through the land use process, but there's still that other step that we need to make sure is tied in.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, sometimes it can be difficult because the review process with the land use is, you know, a long duration. And then if you don't start the building permit during that time, I mean, you're talking about really long time, and it can be a turnoff for developers or,
yes, yeah.
You know,
Understood.
Well, the next part of this was some classic process mapping, and hopefully you found and do find this useful. You can take it home with you, continue to reach out to us, ask us questions. The overall concept here is communicating 3 things. On the left side, you see your project types broken into blue, pink, and purple. So we have different levels of project review. Then moving in further, we have this conceptual, preliminary, final. So there's different scales of review. Not every project, starting from the bottom here, a replat needs to go to conceptual. Replats by design are intended to go right to final. But when it's final, we characterize this as about a 91 to 100%. When it comes in, it's pretty much known. The design work has been done. By contrast, bigger projects, a lot of what you all in this room are working on, start with conceptual. And this was really useful for us internally in working with engineering, is to right size the level of review with where the project is starting. 30%, we're talking conceptual, layout. Did we get the 7 items that Keith was referring to about access and stormwater? Is it generally being thought of? If it's yes, it's going to advance to the more 30 to 90% preliminary stage. And then at final, we're dotting all the I's. This is getting ready for permit issuance and onto that building permit stage. And that's where it's pretty much been settled, the design. So we have project type, level of review, and of course now a review process. It does repeat itself between them all. It's pre-app meeting, it's complete, it's agency referrals, both internal and external compliance review, and a staff recommendation going to hearing. Your conceptuals and your preliminaries are going to council and our community development commission. And then your finals here, purple, these are administrative. And we very much intentionally and will continue to try and put as much in the administrative bucket as we can. By design, this is our biggest category, going up a little bit to our community development commission, and then going up even higher. Really only 2 projects that require 2 public hearings, 2 levels of project that require 2 public hearings. So this was useful for us to see this laid out, see the sequence, and hopefully you find this useful as well.
A lot to digest there, so
yeah,
feel free to
at
take it
times
home and
we wondered if we're putting too much in one graphic, but this is what we're trying to capture as well. And I mentioned already how Keith and his team really helped right size their review, because it's easy to go when something walks in the door to start overanalyzing, and overanalyzing is great for feedback, but it also slows down the project. So sometimes they get stuck at conceptual for a little too long, and we want to get the feedback so it can move on.
And I think, for the designers and the engineers in the room, realizing that from day one, you don't need to come in with 100% plans, and you can show these concepts, can engage us in, oh yeah, that looks good, you have enough space or not, and starting there instead of you putting in all that work to get to 90% plans for a client. And then we come in and we're like, whoa, wait, we've got to really shift things. So just realizing that's what the pre-app's for, that's what that level of review is for, is before diving into the details, we're able to provide some higher level guidance and make sure all the key elements are being factored in.
I think we wanted to point out too that, so the matrix that I kind of walked through before, that's our conceptual level matrix. So we're going to try and keep those higher level comments do a quicker review and not spend as much time on the detail. We really dig into the detail. And so we don't want people to be caught off guard when they get 6 or 7 comments on the conceptual phase, and then we come back in the preliminary and get 50. Like the deep dive is in the preliminary. And yes, we're going to find things that we didn't do conceptual, and that's intentional, so that the conceptual goes quicker. And that's where I think you may not need to spend as much time or money or effort in that conceptual phase. It saves your client time, your client money, potentially, because the time is the money. And then we get a little bit more appropriate review at each level.
You guys have like internal standards you're trying to hit as far as timing right now? Like if I came in on that conceptual phase with, major project development, do you have a theory of what you would like to hit from a planning standpoint? If you're on the ball, the client's on the ball, like how does that look like to get through the whole roadmap?
Yeah, 8 weeks is the number that's been thrown around, and that allows, and that's not necessarily from pre-app, but that's from a complete application.
Okay.
And
those are the largest projects.
Right, that's a big scale.
Crater
where
subdivision.
it's
Those are
going to hearing. And so that is building in 3 weeks of that is internal and external review.
Right.
Several weeks of staff report writing, and then a week or 2 of public notice. So it very quickly gets spent, that 8 weeks.
And we'll circle back to that,
receiving a
Logan, with our, some upcoming improvements too. We have a tool that we're looking to deploy that'll really clearly show that both to the customer and to the staff of timelines. So
Yeah, okay,
Come
yeah,
back to
I'll
that.
wait, then we can throw that out later.
Well, I mentioned the community development condition. We took 3 boards and combined them into one. So the Board of Adjustment, the Planning Commission, and we still call it the Planning Commission, and our Design Review Board have all been absorbed in the Community Development Commission. It's a 7-member board. They've met once already. It's still the 4th Monday of the month. And the idea here was to bring in the land use component from planning and the design review component into the same setting. They have historically been 2. That's 2 different meetings, 2 different weeks, and the noticing that would occur for all of them. Bringing those volunteer commissioners and the valuable perspective they bring from a design and both land use and the public in terms of who's our applicant. We talked about it's just not those at the table, it's the public at large, to facilitate a process where there can be review, public hearing, public comment, and a decision made or recommendation in some cases in one body. So that was an example of a process improvement that occurred in this last year. We also had 4 instances where we put more things in the lower bucket. So we moved projects that were in the middle category here down, and we took projects that were in the highest category and moved them to this pink category. So thereby eliminating 1 fewer public hearing, or in the case of a replat, no public hearing. It could be done administratively. Minor subdivisions are now administrative. So we took out multiple public hearings
minor subdivisions just go to Community Development Commission. So just one meeting. A boundary adjustment or a replat with no new lots being created, that's in fully administrative. So,
I made that administration.
a minor subdivision still has a commission review.
Yeah, thank you.
But again, that's the idea of that more efficient review timelines. I think we've done a good job building trust with our city council. They're not necessarily wanting to see every 2-lot subdivision or a boundary adjustment, that they have a lot of other things they're trying to figure out. And so they have supported this sort of right sizing of our review process to give us some more administrative authority and also that new commission. So great process. Some of you helped support that change, so thank you for that. I'll kind of breeze through these. We're looking at like 20 more minutes and we want to touch on what's coming in the future. But here's a few examples that a lot of these we've already spoken to. The key thing here is this, again, direction from our elected officials and I think more broadly from our community to try to more proactively partner with projects that deliver some community benefit. So this isn't every project. This isn't everything that comes in the door, but when there's the ability to either like bridge a gap and bring cost of a unit down or bring some land to the table and work with a developer to provide value there, we have that pretty clear direction to be involved in those conversations. We have quite a bit of funding right now, particularly in our housing fund, to do this type of work. So I just flagged these for you to be aware of so that, again, if you're starting to talk to a client, if you see a piece of property, if you have an idea, we can have these, higher level partnership type conversations and look for ways to provide some community benefit. So I guess, does anybody have any questions about any of these projects or any of those topics we just talked about?
Scott, we built the gauge. What in your mind, what partnership did the planning department form with the developer?
That came afterwards. Our housing division worked with the owner of the property. And I don't know if I'm going to say the exact numbers right, but we bought down the price of rent for a 2-year period for 30 of the units. And they're marketing those to the community at a reduced rate if they qualify based on their income. So it wasn't necessarily a review or there were some other pieces where we waived some fees, but it was more on the back end of the cost for the rentals. And that's an agreement we have with, what's the entity?
4 Points.
Yeah, 4 Points.
But you guys, my understanding was they also increased the unit per acre count to allow the developer to have a little bit more density with an offset.
bonus. I'd have to check on that.
That's what I talked to Ava about.
Okay,
was
okay.
During that annexation process and the land use, it was like, well, if you can squeeze, I forget what the number is, I want to say it's like 14, but then give 10 of those up. So then those conversations may have changed, but the whole concept was looking at the site as a whole and saying, we'll let you do more if we get, because again, at the time, the fair share program didn't apply to apartments. So the only mechanism the city had was at that annexation point to try and get some deed restriction out of it.
Yeah, there were a lot of facets to that one, and there were some initial conversations about density and those units, but then after it was built, we have an agreement. Housing Solutions for the Southwest is overseeing the rental reductions. So.
And that's the same as like a for sale unit where Homes Fund then calculates the AMIs and makes sure that everybody comes through the program compliant.
They do the administrative work for the
end.
deed restriction. Yeah. Homes Fund doesn't really deal in rentals, so we had to work with Housing Solutions on that.
Gotcha.
Housing Solutions and the property manager who's renting out all the market rate units. Yeah. I think Three Springs and La Posta, there we're funding design of infrastructure to help kind of jumpstart that and also be involved in if there are unique elements that we can discuss. Durango Crossings is land out by East Animas and Florida by Star Liquor, and we're working with a local developer to contribute, I think, 3 acres of city property towards that development, and in exchange, 50% of the units are going to be deed restricted. So that had to go through annexation and preliminary plan, but that's well on its way to being finalized.
Annexation of La Posta will be a big simplification of process. We have a county partner now leading up to that, but ultimately the county is supportive of the city being that main jurisdiction. But known that to be a desired outcome.
The focus there is not so much housing. There is a housing component to La Posta, but it's more warehouses, lay down yards, business development in that northern part of La Posta.
Scott, coming from Montrose, are you looking to try and replicate the Riverfront Industrial Park they did there recently with La Posta, or is that too much scale?
Yeah, I've definitely been tracking that, and that is a URA project in Montrose. I think it's a little bit different than what we're looking at La Posta, but it's definitely informed. There's a couple good projects in Grand Junction too. They're really reclaiming the riverfront.
Right. Because that has a pretty significant industrial manufacturing component in addition to the residential unit count's pretty high in Montrose.
Great. So I guess the lesson there is, come talk to us if there's a housing component, job creation, business development, some other sort of public benefit. City Council last week just had a 2-day strategic plan retreat. And this isn't finalized yet, but they're updating that document. And again, I'm sharing this with you so that you're familiar with what those priorities are, what the terms are that council's looking for when they're approving funding, when they're looking at projects. This is where the strategic plan has been for the past 2-3 years, and this is where it's going right now. You can see innovative housing and economic development as one of 5 core goals that City Council is wanting us to deliver on. You can take a minute and look at the others. What's that? Reliable infrastructure, big emphasis on transportation, looking at transit funding as well, as far as community connectivity in the airport, continuing to support the airport and its improvement. And then engaged and informed community, big priority on reaching out and engaging citizens in newer ways than we've done in the past. Instead of having 30 different boards and commissions, how do we do more targeted outreach and get more diverse representation from the community? Just again, this is all draft, but I thought you might be interested in these. These are the 3 objectives that they're looking at under that innovative housing and economic development goal. A lot of words there, so just a flag for you to kind of track that as it gets finalized. And again, thinking about, you can see a lot of the things we've talked about: community-driven planning, strategic infrastructure investment, partnerships, getting that all at a level, at the council level, budgeted for, supported at that scale. So like I said, we have already been granted a lot of funding for housing projects, and really want to put that money to work. Results.
Have you received state money, or is this local money?
We received some federal money and state money. A lot of that was targeted towards the Best Western project, or specific to it. But we have some state money for planning and software improvement. And then there was a general fund, what they called an opportunity fund, that had some money, and they transferred that into housing, for housing specific. Our funding also comes for housing, also comes from Three Springs transfer fee, Twin Buttes transfer fee, and then fair share fees. Those are the other revenue streams for housing.
Scott, do you know when the inclusion of rental projects will be formalized into fair share? Is that in process still?
The draft is pretty much done. We're planning to take that to Community Development Commission the end of this month for first review, the draft of the new fair share program, and then it'll go to council in April. So it's ready to go. And
Right.
a lot of you have been involved in those conversations too.
It may not go into effect until October. There were grant stipulations that they had to advance it now. But just to give enough time to like work through current projects and iron out a couple kinks before it went live, I think they're still discussing it going into effect September, October.
Right, okay.
Is there high-level guidelines of that out right now?
I don't
The,
think yet.
the packet is being prepared this week, so yeah, we can send that out.
Okay.
The CDC packet. You can read it on the beach.
That'd be
website,
great.
yeah.
I'll do that.
It's just the thing.
I'll get with Eva and we'll read it together.
These are the projects we shared at the strategic plan retreat. One thing I want to touch on, the economic opportunity and initiatives. So some of you have worked with Tommy Crosby. He has drafted a policy that will allow us to look at some tax rebates for job creation. That goes back to recruitment. I'll just speak openly. We were looking at a grocer in the Three Springs area and trying to incentivize them they have all their approvals to pull the trigger. And so we put together a package of tax rebates to try and help that go forward. We'll see. There's a variety of other factors right now that a lot of you are familiar with about grocery stores out there. We'll see if that specific project goes forward, but we have a policy that we're going to take to council that will allow us to do those types of agreements for other key projects, commercial development, job creators. So look for that. It would be great if some of you came and expressed interest or support for that policy once it's ready, because it is kind of a new approach for Durango. We've looked at a lot of other communities. A lot of communities have programs like that. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but it's something that, will be new for our community.
So another long overdue process improvement is to make a more online permitting software. So we've partnered with OpenGov. We currently have them for our budget module in finance, and we're bringing over a community development module. We're about halfway through the design. We're looking to go live in July of this year. And there's a video here. We can play it, or I can just give you the highlights. Scott, your call in terms of what we're going to have as outcomes. But we're long overdue. I think you all can appreciate for online submittals, online payments, a portal, a lot like the county has, for viewing your project, seeing where your project may be in a workflow. It's affirming, great, I'm complete, I'm tracking for hearing. It's also useful for the public. They get a notice in the mail, their census location, they can go review the materials and know that, okay, I'm at step 3 of 5. That really helps them be assured that there's a process occurring and they know where to fit in. With anything these days, it's very rich with data, so it's all location specific, and that informs floodplain, special standards, and Twin Buttes about fire sprinklering. We're integrating all the GIS data layers. It would allow us to do not only internal referrals to partners like engineering, but external, Durango Fire and others, getting the system and a tracking procedure in place. And then for the building side in particular, and code enforcement side, we would enable features in the field for conducting inspections, uploading photos, having very streamlined checklists, and then be able to determine pass fail. You all would benefit from being able to see this information. You get a report at the end of that inspection. Okay, these are the 5 things that I need to work on. So long overdue for some modernization there. And then lastly, more of an internal housekeeping item. We have a document database.
When local governments.
So we would be doing that.
It's worth watching.
sound.
Of course, there'll be a VRBO commercial, sure of it, since they.
When local governments and individuals work side by side, communities thrive. Like when a business owner applies or a new homeowner requests. Requests a building permit to.
We can send it out maybe.
Yeah. I can try to.
This goes back to the survey comments we received about digital submittals, online payments, and accelerated process review. Hoping to hit some of those objectives.
When local governments and individuals work side by side, communities thrive. Like when a business owner.
Yeah, let me send it out. Information.
Thanks, Daniel. Daniel's working hard on that, and I think that's going to be a major improvement.
And this is a little bit difficult to read, and these are all tentative dates, but just an overview of a few anticipated code updates by topic area. We're looking now, and there are a few that are that have been completed, which we touched on, which were in 2023, which are the first three on that list, and that includes the Community Development Commission. There were some minor cleanup changes with the ADU program, and then a few procedural changes, which we illustrated with the replat and knocking a few of those tiers of public hearings down. Those went into effect in February 1st of this year. We also were working on the Fair Share Ordinance, and that first part one went in front of council and the planning commission at that time in later in 2023. And then we just recently had a few updates regarding detached condominiumization. And that is another subdivision type, which is now integrated within our code, and that went into effect later in February. And then some floodplain FEMA incorporations to remain a participating jurisdiction. And then our upcoming code update topics, at least this year, include some bigger picture ones. So we touched on the Fair Share Part 2. That's the first tier, that red piece, which is slated to go in front of Community Development Commission and then later City Council. The next would be the lighting code and kind of opening that up and coordinating with Visit Durango and other local and regional partners and other municipalities on dark sky standards and certification process. And the role the city would play is integrating that with our code to make sure it's dark sky compliant, and a lot of emphasis on education and community outreach on what this means and the impact it would have on both residential areas and also commercial areas and the rollout. So the non-conforming piece and making sure that there's enough education with this is actually what this looks like and the time frame and coming into compliance is a little bit more flexible with dark sky standards. And then we're looking in-house at working on the temporary use permit section and some other cleanup areas. And then the parking code has been in the works for a while, and that would include change of use, which we've touched on a couple times today because that is a touch point for a lot of projects and applications, and we want to help coordinate that better. And a lot of that does trigger parking standards and things like that. And that would also trigger updates to the EV standards and multimodal infrastructure per state statutes. So incorporating that into the parking code update. And then finally, there were some statutory changes to legalized mushrooms, which we have to push through prior to the end of the year.
It's the one you've all been waiting for.
Yeah.
What in the building code has to change for legalized mushrooms?
Well, it's in the land use code. So yeah, in the land use development code, it would be kind of like what the city went through 10 years ago or whenever with retail marijuana establishments, at least providing it as a use option within our different metrics and tables, and then also where those clinics, because I believe it has to do with clinics. So it's not so much of a retail take it away, but it's a clinic, where those would be and what those conditional uses would be.
These setback rules and all this stuff similar to liquor stores and marijuana stores.
I believe so. And yeah, we're working with the deputy clerk on that piece because they've kept their finger on the pulse a little bit better than us, but we're gonna coordinate with them to get that advanced.
So for the builders and architects in the room too, we're looking at IBC updates.
Yeah.
And do you not have time frame? for-
Yeah, so there's two pieces of this. I think first I'll mention that we're also looking at our fee schedule. Our valuations are based on 2013 national ICC data. So we're long overdue to update. We're proposing to, along with the fair share package, move forward, updating our building valuations to 2023 ICC data, which is still dramatically below local standards. It's about half of what it actually costs to build, but at least it won't be 2013. So we're moving our permit valuations, and then we think here in '24, we'll begin laying the groundwork in '25 to adopt 2024 IBC and IRC, as well as the energy code and the existing building code, a lot of things that have long since been outstanding for the city.
We'll probably do some more focused outreach on that as we get closer to those.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of trying to track, like you were saying, Jack, state and federal legislation as well and get out ahead of that. Thanks, Lily.
Sure.
So I think we can end on this, and then any other questions or comments you want to bring up. Again, really appreciate your time and input. I hope you see the work that's happening, and we just be honest, we're not always going to agree or have the same perspective, but I hope you can at least get a glimpse behind the curtain and understand that we do really care about the community. We have a valuable role to play in the community, and we want to try and make sure we're delivering on those expectations. We think you all have a very valuable role to play in the community, and we want to support you as much as we can by giving these, defining these processes, creating more clarity around it, because the city doesn't actually, rarely do we build things. We're not out actually building things, and if we want to meet some of these challenges, like job creation, housing, all those things, we need to have strong partnerships and at least a shared understanding of the roles that we each play. So this is just a quick list with the emphasis on strategic planning, and you have asked some questions around this topic. If you were in our shoes, what would you set up as ways to ensure that we're hitting the mark, how to demonstrate performance? Some very simple ones about timeframes and tracking that more closely. We have a lot of pretty generic responses right now. We're like, 8 to 10 weeks, and I know that can be frustrating, trying to hone that in and dial that in a little more, is definitely on our minds. But what other types of things, when you think about community development department, would you think are important metrics to track, demonstrate success?
You survey people after they go through the process and and have the ranking, these areas to improve on, having people that go through the process actually provide that feedback.
Surveys, we've done some customer outreach, but the specific projects, that's a good thought.
Scott, I have to run, I'm sorry,
Okay.
but thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for putting
thanks
us
for the
on. It's very informative.
Good, man. Hope you have a good trip.
You all.
Thanks.
Take care.
We do a lot of reporting to the state, so we're demonstrating compliance at our level. So we definitely want to raise that to make sure council's aware of those things, that we're tracking water quality impacts and those types of very tangible outcomes. But yeah, so after action reports, what else comes to mind?
I would say, Scott, if the goal is workforce housing, and I've seen reports out there by the city and other folks about how many we're short, I would say that community development ought to have a metric of projects that actually get approved, of workforce housing that's actually approved, not steps along the way, or we've done these partnerships. How many units did we approve?
Okay.
I think resources too, like I know the city's really leaning on private-public partnership, and a lot of that stuff requires significant resources, either through the grant side, or state funds, federal funds. You know, like the TWG project being LIHTC, the capital stack for that is like the kind of math I don't think anybody in the room likes to do. But if the city would have the capacity, I don't know if that goes through the housing division or what, but it's like if I'm a builder, developer, and I'm interested in doing a private-public partnership, my ability to walk in the door and say, here's my general concept, what resources do you guys think you have? So that I can look at it from a financial position and say, okay, now I can model this out based on my costs and then what the city can actually bring to the table. Because the sense I get is the city is now looking more towards the carrot approach as opposed to the stick approach when it comes to affordable housing. And a lot of people just don't have the bandwidth or the experience in that, especially locally. I mean, you know, regionally in Denver and stuff, there's firms that specialize in that stuff, but it just seems like if we want to continue to entice people to build here that aren't necessarily out of area, because it seems like some of the most significant projects are entities from out of area that come in with those resources. There's ways for the city to utilize their exposure to those programs to help us put things in motion. That would be awesome.
That was one of the things I'm sort of most proud of or most liked about the Animas City Park project. It was not this massive, 400 unit affordable apartments by a national developer. It was Agave, locally, know the community, local architect. I think those are good talking points. So we're not just giving these incentives out to outside firms.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
What do you guys need? So I see 1,100 calls a week. That's like 3-4 hours per person a week in my head. How do you have time to do your job? I mean, do you need more people?
The simple answer would be to respond yes, and I appreciate you saying that, Zane, and pointing that out.
You're modernizing a lot of processes, which is
Exactly.
helping, which is awesome. Well, I think Dan's touched on, but at the end of the day, if I had employees spending half their day responding to people.
Yeah, it's hard to do this policy work and other stuff that we want to be doing.
I think part of that too is we're hoping to really start tapping in, more illustrative and, other options for just reiterating the process, these checklists, the expectations, the code in ways that isn't just a link to the code, dive in and good luck, but it's these are the options and these are the requirements and everything else. So before you even get to the pre-app phase, it's digestible and it's transparent on the website and with OpenGov. And I'm hopeful that within this year, we'll have a lot more updated checklists and application permit forms and things
do
to
it yourself.
Yeah, do it yourself before. And if, you're approving yourself, hopefully that'll at least get us in the better direction. And I think that would cut down a lot too with phone calls. If someone's looking for something that's pretty straightforward, but it's just maybe right now hard to navigate the website or hard to navigate the code, hopefully having just a bigger repertoire of resources for people, both on the business side of things and the economic side, and then also within housing and digesting the new fair share policy programs and then also the code and typical bread and butter development opportunities, whatever that looks like. And I think that takes time. And sometimes it is, if you have a connection with a planner, it's easier to just call them or email them to ask them a quick question. But hopefully too, if we have more updated resources, that's going to cut down on that.
Simple answer to that?
Yeah, so I was gonna comment on that and point out the one thing on the little diagram here. If you go to the preliminary on the right side, you see that there's a circular step in there. That's kind of our resubmittals, right? And in terms of what we need, I think the response to those submittals is one of the things that takes a lot of time. And I've had this mantra in the past that I've said that if you want to go past, follow our code. If you want to debate about the standards and the codes and what's required, that takes more time. What's more important to you? And every time we do one of those resubmittals, if we do 2 resubmittals, that's a month of review. We do 3 submittals, 4 submittals, 5 submittals. Those sorts of things, I think that really suck up a lot of time, and I think it frustrates people. I wish Wes was here and Darren was there, since they're 2 people I correspond with a lot. But then it gets into those things of now we're talking and you just email us and say, hey, what about this? And you call us and, hey, what about this? And all those things take time. And so that's one of the things that grasp what we need. that would be helpful on our end, and I think it would help relieve some frustration.
So that's definitely my biggest frustration with the whole process. I mean, on simple things, can we call you and get an answer and try to streamline that? I mean, is that possible?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky balance because
Yeah, I
a lot of
understand.
you know us, and so you'll just pick up the phone and call us directly, and that's fine. And we also don't want to put a planner in the middle of a conversation that they don't need to be in the middle of. So I
Yeah.
think those things are fine, but then the project as a whole, it is really managed by the planner and that's the single point of contact. So it's kind of it's a tricky balance, but yes.
I mean, we're trying to get a permit for the fire station right now. And we get a whole lot of comments on landscaping. Turn it back in, we get 4 comments back. Half of them are new, at least half of them are new. And it's kind of feels like we're going in a circle. And I've had the same thing from engineering reviews. And so that's our biggest frustration is every time you send it in, they come up with something new. So.
One thing I would bring up along those lines is like, you know, in a site plan submittal, the architect and the design team have their own steps that they're walking through, SD, DD, and CD. And you guys don't see anything until we're almost finished with the plans. And so what you were just saying was that, you know, that takes up a lot of your time talking to the design team, architects and engineers during the process. And I get that, but that also keeps us from doing the little circle down at the end. And it's super important. I mean, this doesn't take it into consideration at all what the actual design of the project is as you're going as the design team's going through it.
Does this help at all?
Yeah, I was
Submitting.
gonna say, I think that's kind of how we broke this up, is that instead of calling and asking questions, we go through that conceptual step first. And it kind of,
That's where the questions can get raised.
Not spending as much time really getting like way down the line, and then we come back and say, oh, this doesn't meet our standards, and revise this. I think that was part of how we're hitting on the conceptual.
so when you bring in that conceptual stuff, it's only at 30%. We're at that,
You
we're kind of working through that step together instead of you guys working through it by yourselves and bringing us 90% plans and us saying, well, you know, we're missing all these things or whatever. We're working through this step together instead of getting down to the end and having all these comments.
Are you getting silly questions where people clearly haven't studied?
I'd say it varies, yes. Where I think, I mean, I've had this comment to me before where people say, well, you know your code better than we do. And we submit to all kinds of municipalities and jurisdictions, and we don't know the city's code as well as you do, and that's what they're looking for help. And I think that's fine, but I think there's a lot of basics that sometimes get overlooked. And that was, again, was kind of going back to that. We're asking for these things every time, and trying to simplify that so that people realize don't let the little things or the easy things trip up your project.
I think we're you know, comments, trying to capture everything first round. I think that's something we hear a lot, and surprises, and it's just, you know, as plans change, we need to be able to capture and comment on things, but we hear that to try and capture all those.
But things like,
Ways to, I think I've intentionally tried to resist this drift towards like over bureaucratizing the process and making it impersonal. And it's a balance, like he's saying, like, yeah, if you have a question, we want to be accessible, we want to be able to, but we also have to set up kind of standardized processes that we're all having to get the same expectations. So, you know, I talked to like Dean Brookie or someone, he goes to LA and he can't talk to anybody without, you know, getting through all these firewalls and all these, you know, forms online. I don't think we want to go that far, but we definitely do want to better standardize so that we can measure performance, so that we can have clarity on timelines. Does that mean you can't call us or walk over or, you know, no, but I think there is a bit more of standardization that needs to happen for everybody's benefit, so. You know, something you were gonna say, Allison?
I was just, as you were starting, thinking that when we get, something in it preliminary that doesn't have stormwater on it, that's kind of a red flag for us. Those things where something is entirely left out. It's not so much that you're necessarily being asked, how many square feet do we need for this to be set aside for stormwater? It's just that it's not even considered in a conceptual plan, and those kind of misses are time consuming and require the resubmittal and going back through and around again. Those are the ones that we're hoping to reduce that.
You guys are very, you guys, SEH, are very, I don't think we're talking about you guys in that case. You've done your
Right.
homework, you know the standards, but we deal with a wide spectrum of applicants. So those are things that trip us up and take a lot of our time when we're having to educate.
Or a drainage study or whatever associated.
We're over time. Thank you again for spending a little bit of time with us. Take some food if you want, and then we may do these sort of biannually or something, kind of do check-ins. But feel free to reach out if you have other things on your mind or you want to share with me. You can reach out to me directly.
Could I just make a comment at the risk of sounding ungrateful? Tracy just made a comment. A real serious frustration he's dealing with. He submits for a lot of projects in the city. And the answer was a non-answer. The answer was, we're not going to address that. That's frustrating for us. That's the answer I heard, which is kind of frustrating for me to listen to. I don't deal with it as much as Tracy does, but the comment wasn't addressed. And I don't, that doesn't to me sound like a real collaborative answer. I got to be honest, you guys.
I wrote it down. I mean, I wrote down no new comments after first round. So it wasn't an attempt to shirk that responsibility or anything.
Can you elaborate a little more, Mike?
Well, what it sounded to me like, Keith, and maybe I'm wrong, is Tracy expressed a frustration, and not that your answer is not valid, but it sounded like that's the way it is. That's kind of what I heard, and if I heard wrong, my bad.
I guess which part of it was, that's just the way it is. I'm missing something
That's
here.
kind of what I thought I got in your response. I didn't hear an answer to his question, his frustration. I didn't hear an answer.
So going back to your frustration,
Thanks for coming.
multiple submittals with new comments and resubmittals. Yeah, I guess I'll try to elaborate on that. We don't necessarily want to come up with new stuff randomly. That's not our intent. We're trying to be as thorough as we can up front. And this is one of the things we struggled with a little bit with this diagram, right? Is engineers are analytical people. We like the details and we dive into the details. And I think that was one of those things with the conceptual we struggled with. We wanted to do a deep dive on every review, right? But it takes time. So in terms of getting the right size of review, we said, okay, well, conceptual, let's stay higher level. And that will be a quicker review. It'll get you to the next step. We still need to be able to dive into the details. And that's when things are going to come up that maybe we didn't give you comments on in the first bill, right? These new things will come up. Going into that detail, as things go through a submittal and then they come back with another submittal, we kind of have to start over and re-review everything. And sometimes what changed on the first submittal has a snowball effect on other pages, right, in the submittal. And so sometimes we either catch things we didn't catch in the first review, or because it changed between submittals, the submittal has evolved and then new things come up. We're not intentionally trying to come up with new comments. That's not our point. We want to catch everything on the first one. We would love it if we could do one submittal and one resubmittal back to our comments and we're done. But I think sometimes things evolve and site plans change, or they rework the site plan and buildings move, or roads move, or those things happen, and then we have to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And again, we don't want to come up with new comments because we know it's frustrating, but sometimes that happens, and I don't know how to avoid that, I guess.
I don't think we're talking about going from here to here. We're talking about going here to here
Yeah,
to here.
the spinning in
Yeah.
here, yes, exactly.
And, the landscaping thing, for example, if we could just have a comprehensive review that includes everything the first time and not have new comments when it goes back for review.
Right. Well,
And
just for another example from our end, right? We had a project that went through and they had a water line crossing the storm line. Sorry, this is really specific, right? And we made the comment in the first set of plans, and then they came back and they changed the alignment of the water and the sewer. Well, then the water line wasn't 4 feet deep and the crossing didn't meet our standards. That didn't apply in the first submittal because they weren't crossing each other in the same way. It applied in the second one, so it seemed like a new comment. It wasn't something that we were trying to pick out after the fact, but the site plan had changed. I don't know how we avoid those things other than we try and educate or share information of make sure you're doing these things on your plans so that our standards, and even when things change, you can still meet our standards. Make a comment? I don't know.
so
I'm open for suggestion there, I guess.
here's my suggestion.
Okay.
We'll come up with some examples and
Okay.
we'll send them to you. And you guys take a look at them and we can work together to see if there's a more efficient way to process those.
Okay.
But I also want to say, I've been doing this since 1997, and this is the most progressive and professional this department has ever been. Scott in particular has always been very open to coming in with unique ideas. That's kind of how ACPO came about. It was a comment during Planning Commission, and I think I took it to Savannah and came up with a new idea. And they were definitely encouraging for new ideas and innovative ways to provide housing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we want to be genuine and have it make a real difference. So it's sometimes we're still going to have that bit of tension because we do have that regulatory function. We do have to track that. So it's not always going to be exactly how as quick or as cheap as you want it. And I think it's worth being honest about that, but knowing what's underlying our intentions, being clear about that, I think goes a long way. So.
It seems too like the city, that metric or that chart you showed where city council, we'll find out if there has to be a will to change some things or you guys can't get anything done. And we'll see. I don't know. Some of those are hard changes, but we can't not change anything, expect something to change. So hopefully.
And measure the impact. That's a key thing I want to get us thinking about and communicating that out. And then also realizing some of the stuff on housing and why we started where we did. Some of those factors are out of any of our control. And being honest about that, we're not going to overpromise like we're solving the affordable housing crisis in Durango. It's something that you manage and you mitigate and you learn as you go because even numbers of units approved, we don't control how many applications come in the door, right? So we're a bit responding to the market conditions and all that. So yeah, just a lot of different factors that we think about, things we can control and also acknowledging things we can't. So
I think that's probably one of the keys from the business standpoint is the things you can control, expediting, and not getting caught but getting an answer first time. And that's where I always say having everybody sitting around the table because that's what I've heard, and so if you can expedite that can make it, more efficient, and not having to go back and say, oh, they got to change the landscaping or the fire or this, and something comes up. But the more streamlined it can be where everyone's at the table. So it can't be
from the start.
But I do agree the culture has vastly improved. I have heard that. I'm glad to hear, Tracy say that. It's, I will say that Zane left, so somebody please let him know I plugged it, but Wednesday night, they do have their housing forecast with, Bob Allen that's going on at the college. So it'll be really good to hear that.
Eva is going to be speaking there along with
Yeah.
Lynn
Yeah,
Hyde from
really
the
good
county and Nicole from Bayfield.
And thanks for
Thank
bringing
you.
some clarity to us, not hearing that.
I did, but
I
thanks
think
for
you
listening.
did, actually,
Thanks.
between the two of
Yeah.
you.
Good to see you.
That's
Thanks.
a classic example of we hear what we're used to hearing and it just went past and wasn't clearly answered. So